Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You're welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We are getting ready to start. We're just waiting for one of our panelists, Madame Stella. She's just joining in, and we will be getting started in a bit. So just give us one moment, please. Thanks. So good afternoon once again, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies, we have just had a small delay with one of our panelists, but we shall certainly get started in about 2 minutes or so. Thanks. All right. Thanks for your patience, members. We apologize for the slight delay, but I know that at the end of it, we will still, I'm excited that we have a good topic today, which is, as you all know, AI, robotics, and the data protection implications in employment. So that's our topic today. I'll start with introducing myself. Moses Segawa, my name's. I work with S&L Advocates, and I head the employment and pensions practice. And I also currently have the honor of leading the labor cluster, labor and retirement benefits cluster. And this webinar is one of the first events we're having this year. So we're very excited, and we know we have started with a great topic, and we have great panelists with us who I am privileged to introduce. I will start by introducing Madame Stella Aliwatese, who is the National Personal Data Protection Officer. She's joining us today and will be speaking to us on this very novel subject. Welcome, Madame Stella.
Thank you, Moses. I'm privileged to be here, and I'm looking forward to our interaction.
Great. We're looking forward to hearing from you. We also have with us Mr. Samuel Lenzi, who is the head of data and analytics from Stanbic Bank. He is not a lawyer, but he's a data professional. And again, he's here to speak to us on this subject, especially on AI. So Samuel, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Sure, sure. So
I hope no one asks me legal questions.
Don't worry. I'm sure that whatever will be asked is something that is within your capabilities. And I note that both panelists are data practitioners. And I was just earlier, I was speaking to Stella, and I reminded her that 10 years ago, a couple of years ago, when she was still in the retirement benefits sector as a regulator, I used to call her a lot, because obviously I'm in the sector. And how times have changed. She's now a data regulator. So, I mean, who knew that at some point we'll have data practitioners? But here we are, the world's changing very fast. And we as lawyers need to change and upskill. And we're certainly, the reason why we're having this is to try and get ourselves ready for this changing world. So just to give you a very quick brief of the structure of this panel and how we're going to run, we're going to have some questions put to our panelists to educate us on these novelties. And we'll start with the AI side. We'll also have, since we are dealing with AI, we're going to have AI deployed in the live environment. So we will be asking AI some questions, ChatGPT, and we'll also invite you to poll on some interesting questions. So I'm really excited and looking forward to your questions. We will also have question and answers. We will also give opportunity for those who may want to make comments. So without wasting much time, I'm also going to ask my colleagues, we're going to start with an AI moment. So I'll welcome my colleagues, Jemima and Julian, to take us to our first AI moment to get us started. So they'll be doing a demo. I'll just hand over to them now. Over to you, ladies.
Thank you, Moses. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jemima Chihokyo. I'm an associate at FNL Advocate. I'm joined by my colleague, Julian Mwebaze. So together we will bring you the first AI moment. We're excited to introduce AI to this conversation. So today we are discussing AI, we're discussing robotics. So we thought it prudent to have an AI guest today with us. So I'll just share my screen and we'll have our first AI moment. So the guest that we are having now is ChatGPT, and we wanted to see how we'd engage and interact with ChatGPT. So there's talk that ChatGPT is replacing a lot of lawyers' roles, and whether you agree with that or not, we just want to find out what ChatGPT would think if we asked it to draft an employment contract. So that's what we want to do now, rather briefly. So that's the question that we have put to ChatGPT to ask it to draft an employment contract for a lawyer that has been appointed in a Ugandan law firm. So as you can see, the response is generated almost instantly, and it's covered the address, it's covered the details, commencement and time of employment, positions, almost the key elements that you'd be looking for in a contract for a lawyer. And you see it has done this almost instantly. So we just wanted to bring this to you for you to see the interaction that ChatGPT has with the people that use it. We've asked it to draft an employment contract, and this is what it has provided to us. So that's the first AI moment we just wanted to share with you. And if your employment contract looks something like this, you might almost know where your employer got it from. So that was our first AI moment. And now we'll hand it back over to Moses.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you very much, ladies. I would like us to do a quick poll. Jemima, I don't know if you can do a poll on the chat just to find out how many lawyers are using AI or ChatGPT in their work. Yes. All right.
Moses, we'll be sharing the poll as you continue with the conversation.
Okay. So question time. I will now get on with it. We'll start with Samuel. Samuel, there's a lot of talk. AI is taking over everything in the world, etc. What is AI? Is it a fast pie in the sky? Is it real? Over to you, Samuel.
Right. Hi, everyone. This is Samuel here. I don't know if you can see my video. Maybe it's acting up, but that's fine. We should still be able to communicate. I would have loved if Jemima would have asked who are the panelists today to ChatGPT, and if we see and see if ChatGPT knows who are actually taking part in this session. But I guess it's because of the design of ChatGPT that by September of 2021, the data input that went into its creation sort of was stopped at that stage. And everything that comes after that, you probably won't find there. But that doesn't take away from what artificial intelligence is able to do. Now, simply defining what artificial intelligence is, it really, in simple terms, is the simulation of human intelligence processes by machines, especially computers. Now, what just happened in front of us in this session is a clear indication of what human simulation really can look like. So ChatGPT, in this case, what it did was to go through the thinking process that a typical human would do and identify everything that is relevant, one, to Uganda contracts, relevant, two, to an employment contract, and then pieced all of this information together and set it up nicely the way a human would have done this piece of work. Now, I think what really excites me about artificial intelligence is the ability to churn this information in just a couple of seconds and show it to all of us here seated on this call. I thought that would be a very simplistic definition of what artificial intelligence really is. I think as we take further questions on the go, I might be able to give a bit more insights. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Samuel. And perhaps to take that a little further, going by the demo we had, does that mean that lawyers are in trouble? Because I mean, I'm an employment lawyer, and you know, drafting employment contracts has a lot to do with what we do on a daily. So now that these capacities have been democratized, does that mean that, you know, we are in trouble?
So really, that's a very good question. And I think it's a topical concern for employees of today. I think in the first place, I think rather than be concerned about the advancements in technology that are happening around us, we should be looking at how can we take advantage of the technology that is happening around us. The advantage that I believe lawyers have is that the customer of today is extremely impatient. They are looking for instant gratification. If I want to be happy on my WhatsApp, I will put out an emoji and people will make comments about that. Now, artificial intelligence and a lot of other disciplines in technology have enabled these types of advancements to happen around us. I think for me, it is to get with the game rather than to try and run away from the game or imagine that people are here to, rather that ChatGPT is here to take away your opportunities. If we look for what else is possible, then we will all thrive. I don't think, in my view, that ChatGPT is going to replace the lawyer, because when we have to do a court bailiff arrangement, or when we have to go and present our story in the courtroom, I'm not sure ChatGPT is going to be able to pull that off quite easily. But I think those are my 2 cents in my little imagination from the lawyers that I've interacted with and the ones that I've watched in movies. Back to you, Moses.
All right, thank you. That gives us hope. But perhaps just to explore it a little more and you being a tech practitioner and in a big corporate, perhaps it would be interesting for us to know, are these technologies, are they still theoretical? Because just like ChatGPT, it's more or less being tested. But have clients, have employers begun to deploy these technologies on a large scale in the workplace, and particularly in Uganda? Or is it still something that's far off that we can stay comfortable and know that Uganda is still way behind? How much are we interacting with AI and robotics in Uganda?
Okay, great stuff. So maybe let me start from home in Stanbic. the first answer to both your questions on AI and robotics, the first answer is yes, we do use capabilities of AI and robotics in the bank. What I can say is that we don't yet use ChatGPT as a specific capability of AI, but there are elements of artificial intelligence in the field that we actually use. So do employers around the country actually use AI and robotics? I think the short answer is yes. And this is true for Stanbic as well. Maybe to just take you into the field of robotics to start with, how are we at Stanbic using robotics? And maybe just to first of all define what really robotics is. So robotics process automation, or RPA, as most people would know it, is simply a form of process automation of business processes. And you do that using software robots or artificial intelligent agents. When you build a robot that uses artificial intelligence as part of the capabilities, then you call that an intelligent process automation. To give you a sense of what robots can do, say in banking, one of the key capabilities that we exploit is what we call optical character recognition. And this really is extracting of specific text information from either a picture or a PDF or a bank statement or a national ID. And basically what the robot is tasked to do is to go and pick up in large quantities information, for example, from national IDs. And that information could be our regular KYC checks that we do in the organization. And what we are trying to do there is to ensure that the names on the national ID are the same as the names registered to the bank account that the client is owning. The national ID number that appears is matching with the national ID number that we actually have on our systems. The date of birth clearly matches the date of birth that we have on the national ID. So it really is something that we apply on a data quality perspective to basically understand the KYC compliance level that we have within the organization. But usually what then happens, because I'm cognizant that we have lawyers in the room, is we do this as a regular check on documents that the customer has given to us at the time of opening the account with us. And this is to perform two basic, or let me say three basic areas of interest. One is to make sure that the customer that we are serving is the right customer who actually owns the right account, so that we can avoid the risks that come with serving the wrong client against an account. The second thing is really to ensure that we are compliant with regulation, to ensure that we actually have the KYC details of the client to a level that is valid and accurate with the National Registry information, so that in case of any investigations, in case of any maybe checkbacks on did the transaction was the transaction initiated by the right party, those types of things we're able to address appropriately. So there are many other use cases that we can talk about that robotics can actually help with. Moses, have I answered the question in full, or is there a second part to it?
Yes, you have, but we still, I think many are interested in the practical elements of how these technologies are working in Uganda. And interesting to know that, not just when I think about robots, maybe the easiest example would be perhaps it's an ATM. But if we are having even more great systems and chatbots, so how does AI differ from robotics? What's the distinction in practical terms? I think someone would want to know.
Okay, so what robots typically do? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So what robots typically do is that they are assigned a task that is done by a human being on a repeat basis, on a very, very regular basis. For example, if the task is to produce employment letters, you could easily trigger the robot to identify all the information that needs to be fed into specific locations of a draft employment contract, and that information will be plugged into the right places for any number of people. Now, the robot will continue to work whether you have taken a break to pick a cup of coffee or otherwise. The robot will keep in action and it will keep working for as long as possible. Artificial intelligence, on the other hand, complements the robotics journey, in that the technique of actually extracting information that the robot needs to think of extracting information requires either deep learning or some sort of natural language processing techniques to be able to read and recognize the characters that exist, or even recognize the pictures that exist in a document, and then insert them. For you to insert those pictures in the right location, then you need the robot to pick that piece of work to get that done. So they handle similar but require or depend on each other in order to be efficient. I hope that gives you some sort of indication on how that works.
So they are clearly different and they can work in tandem.
Correct. They are interdependent for most of the time.
So is it possible to have a robot which has AI in it, that you have one whole system that's...
Yes, yes, it does. It is possible, and so technically, remember that AI is the intelligent part of what we call intelligent robotics process automation, IRPA. So in the event that specific actions need to be taken, soon after the robot has taken the task as to where it needs to either extract information or consolidate pieces of information from several databases and puts them in one location, what happens then is the intelligent part of that particular robot is the AI in that entire equation. And just to give you maybe an example of where it would work is when we are, for example, making payments. When we are preparing payments, you need some amount of intelligence to know exactly which account you're going to debit and exactly which account you're going to credit. Now, for any transaction to be complete, there must be a somewhere where you will pick the money from and somewhere where you will drop the money. So if you're going to be able to carry out that activity, you need a combination of both robotics. The robot will double click for you on the database. It will open up the database. The extraction of the information will be done using a combination of natural language processing and any visual tool that you may have one that I know is Blue Prism, extract the information, and then go to the place where you need to deposit. First of all, close the other file, that's a robot. Open the new file where you're going to deposit the information, and then capture the information in the fields where it needs to go. That again now becomes your AI. So there is a combination of how these two sort of complement each other and work together to deliver the outcome that you're looking for.
Okay, interesting. So, having said all that you say, in very specific terms, and I know you're not a lawyer, but what opportunities does AI and robotics offer to lawyers in Uganda?
Right. That's a good question. Okay, so I'm going to try and make this out. So I think for me, what AI and robotics can offer lawyers is, like we saw just now, it will give you speed. Remember, I did indicate that clients want instant gratification. Why is my drawing up of my mortgage document, for example, taking longer than it should? And one of the areas that obviously a lot of individuals think about is, why is it expensive to access certain types of services? So it would enable the lawyers to price their services slightly better. I know that it might sound like you will be working yourself out of the market, but in reality, I still believe that you will want to proofread any document that ChatGPT will do for you. But in terms of the operational activity that needs to get done, that piece of work, you can let the machine do that piece of work. And then you focus your efforts on the value adding part of the process, where your human intelligence now comes into question. And I don't think that ChatGPT is going to come up with your signature or your stamp, for that matter. There's so many more other advantages you can find.
Let me just interrupt there, and please, you still have another part of the answer. We want to know how we can leverage this, and you know, it's important that we get to understand this. But let me use myself as an example. When I hear what you said, that we can leverage AI to do those things that previously required expertise. Now, I'll tell you, I've been a labor lawyer for the last several years, and that was my expertise, you know, still is. But if I can see ChatGPT can now write an employment contract just like that, what that means to me is that it's eroding my expertise. It is democratized my expertise, and has put me at the same level with, one, every other lawyer, or two, anyone out there. So one may say it leaves me bare. I can no longer call myself an expert. I don't have a differentiating differentiator, you know, because there's something that is there that can do what I can do. So what am I to do? What am I to do?
Hey, a very good question. Look, human beings by nature thrive best when they connect. And for me, the reason I'm approaching this part of the question with the human connection is to say that there is not a single company that thrives on just this one guy. The company will thrive on the connections that happen between humans. Now, I don't think ChatGPT has been designed to have feelings and to have the sense of empathy, the sense of smell. These are all types of data that I guess the guys in that space are still trying to figure out how to articulate some of these things. That's what you bring to the table. I think for me, we're going to get to a stage where the value add that you bring to the equation is beyond, and again, mark my words, is beyond the operational activity that you have been doing. Take, for example, in banking, we needed, for example, we needed about 200 people to underwrite 6,000 loans a month. We now do 4,000 of those loans, 100% digitally. We don't even need to see the human on the other side. But when you have a problem with your facility, you're going to want to talk to someone in the bank. You're going to want to have an engagement with someone in the bank. So I think there are limitations in technology that, in my view, may take some time to replicate. I believe that you are still relevant and will always be. I want to just take the analogy of the motor vehicles that we use. We have manual cars, we have automated, automatic vehicles. And then we have automatic vehicles where you still need the joystick, but then you will find other automatic vehicles where all you have inside the car to change gears is a knob. Then you will even find vehicles where it is self-drive. Initially, when the Tesla was first designed, it had its own limitations around recognizing black people. If it was a black guy, the Tesla was running through you. If it was a white guy, that was a human being. Wow. So, but these limitations get picked up, and over time, like I've seen a comment about the horses and the vehicle, we still have horses. They still have a place in this world, but we still have cars that actually run much faster. I think the key advice that I would give is that we get with the game. There is no point getting home when you are sweating because you have been driving a manual vehicle. You can actually drive an automatic vehicle and still get home. I think there will still be relevance for lawyers for a long time to come.
Okay, encouraging. Last October, I met a professor who predicted that lawyers will, end of lawyers. And that was about 20 years ago, and lawyers still exist. So maybe we have hope. But again, let me take you on a little more on that. You have introduced the self-driving car, and I think opportunity for us here to explore the downside of AI. I have heard it said that what are the ethical challenges that come in sharp focus? And for me, the nearest example, you are bringing out that bias of the Tesla in the initial stages, whereby maybe its data was only picking white people. But even worse, if the Tesla is self-driving and it gets into a situation of collision, and it has to choose between there's a grandpa on one side and there's a baby or a 5-year-old running across the road, it has to make a decision. What decision is it going to make? Or you, the data guys, what entries are you going to, which choice is going to make? Because you are the guys who decide that kill the granddad or kill the little boy. So please pick on that and tell us about the challenges.
That's a nice trick question. I think the vehicle would take the human choice, step on the brakes and keep everyone safe. I would imagine that's what the human being would do. And since AI is trying to mimic what the human does, I would imagine that that would be the best outcome. So fingers crossed, both the baby and the grandpa are safe, because we need them both.
Oh, but Sam, I'm not going to let you out of jail on that one. Maybe let me bring it a little more into sharp focus. When we had COVID 2 years ago, I remember the oxygen was scarce. I remember reports coming out of Italy and France that where you had, you know, 2 patients, you know, and there was just one cylinder. And so someone had to make a decision. So if it's AI, you know, there's an old man and there's a young 20-year-old. What happens?
So again, and this is why I believe that AI has its own limitations. I think if you asked both parties for the choice, there's a high chance that the old man would say, you know what, I've lived my life, let the baby survive. But we will never know. I really don't have a straight answer.
All right, go ahead and tell us the challenges that, or the problems that AI presents us.
So look, and I think my partner on the call might touch on this. I think so. So the challenges of AI, in my mind, one is that it can be intrusive in nature, and it really will depend on the values of the company or the user to maintain a high level of integrity and ethics on on how they actually deploy AI. So AI has a lot of capabilities. It could, for example, take a picture of a speeding vehicle and send it to the wives of everyone on the call and say, this guy has been over speeding and he got a speeding ticket, so he's adding to your bills. That's not a very good use of AI, even though the intent is to try and have the individual to drive within reasonable speed limits. So I think the ethics around what you can and cannot do with AI, if left to our own devices, people misuse the capabilities that struggle with in forensics audit and so on. They're really superstars at some of these things. So there is definitely individuals whose only piece of work is to misuse the technology that is handed to them. On this call, let me speak for the gentleman. If someone used the right set of tools and the right set of techniques, they can extract all the WhatsApp messages you've had in the last 3 weeks. I'm not too sure how many people here would go back home, but that's a topic for another day. The last one that I want to give, and this is one that is little known by most, when we used one of our AI tools to identify what are the potential risks that come with using AI. One of the risks that actually got highlighted was that there are certain types of AI models that actually demand a lot of compute on either cloud instances or servers that might be sitting in any location. And what typically happens is that the emissions of those servers in the space of running one model are equivalent to that of 5 cars driving on the road. So it then begs the question, the moral responsibility behind those who use these tools. Every time you run that model, what are you doing to our planet? But I think I'm going to leave that one there for the next speaker to have her own views as well. Back to you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, Samuel. That's very enlightening. We will shift gears a bit. We started talking about ethics, the ethics of AI. And, you know, when we talk about ethics, questions like, you know, if we have these technologies are replacing humans in some regard. At least humans pay taxes. These don't, or they are collecting lots of data. So there begs the question: do we need to regulate these systems? Thankfully, we have Stella, who is already a regulator in this space, not exactly in AI, but Stella, just tell us, we can see a lot of ethical questions coming into sharp focus on account of deploying these very, very advanced systems, which we are, as we have seen already, active in our country. What are your thoughts on the ethical challenges that AI presents?
Thank you very much, Moses, for that question. And a big thank you to Samuel for simplifying what AI is to many of us and how it is applied in our practical spaces. Of course, I think one of the things Samuel didn't mention is that in many cases, when you use AI, you collect a lot of data. And in many cases, you have to utilize a lot of data. And because of that, and the fact that these are machines, this is an algorithm, in many cases, it doesn't have that human element. There are a number of drawbacks or adverse effects that we see in the utilization of AI. One of them, Samuel talked about it, bias. It's one of the most pronounced because as some of the participants on the chat were saying, what you put in determines or has a big impact on what that AI system is able to generate or to interpret or to utilize. So for instance, cases have been discussed, especially in the US, where AI systems were, for instance, targeting the Black community, especially when it comes to crime and the like. When you're at an airport, have you noticed that in many cases, it's the Black, tall male who is put aside for that X-ray machine, which I really, really hate. It's very rare because within that system, probably the demographics that have been fed into the system are that the people who commit most of the crimes are either from this neighborhood, of this color, of this height, of these mannerisms, maybe this accent, issues to do with generation and all that. So bias is a critical issue that developers have to address. Of course, when you discuss bias, there's also discrimination, because bias means that you may discriminate against a certain part of the population, or you may not be able to provide services to actually the population that needs those services, or you may exclude them. In the banking sector especially, if AI is not utilized properly, then it means a certain number of the customers may not be able to access loans. Because if, for instance, the AI system says women are the ones most likely to pay up their loans, but then one of the parameters is only assign a certain number to people who are more likely to pay up their loans. So you'll find that a bank will be providing more loans to women than men, yet there should be some level of equity. The other issue is human control, because these AI systems have a lot of information about us, the connectedness of the world. Almost all of us may have smartphones. If I did a poll on these 170 participants, you may find that maybe 99% of them have smartphones. And those smartphones are connected to the grid, They are connected to the telecom providers. These days, smartphones have mobile wallets. You pay your bills using your mobile wallets. You do a lot of reading, you do a lot of research, you do a lot of communication using your mobile phone or your smartphone. And when you do this, in the background, all this information is being collected, and it can be analyzed to actually control you. Issues to do with surveillance, all those ethical issues that we are supposed to talk about when we are dealing with AI. And in especially developed nations, you'll find that there's a big focus on the human rights centered approach of developing these applications. In the UN, the talk is AI must be for good, and that analysis has to be done. And that is why many countries are actually introducing regulation of AI, however difficult it is, because as you'll notice, in our era, there are very many rapid technology developments. I'm one of those people. I was born in the 70s, but when you compare the 70s to where we are now in 2023, many of us didn't have televisions. At some point, we now got black and white, then we got colored. Then now we have the televisions on our smartphones. When you look at the telephones, we didn't even have computers. Now our smartphone can be the telephone, it can be the TV, it can be a computer, for doing your work. We are now even using it to communicate through Zoom or in real time. Those developments have happened in the last, let's say, 50 years. And because of those developments, there are a number of things that regulators have to catch up with. And one of those is to ensure that when these developers develop these systems, they put the human being first. For instance, when Samuel talks about processing 4,000 loans, he will tell us, ideally, there should be a human being who regularly, maybe once a week or once a month, goes through those 4,000 and ensures that this was actually, that it's fair, and that there is no undue advantage to different communities or a certain relation with the targeted community.
Thank you, Stella, for that. Perhaps another question that would come in there very quickly is, would you then recommend that we should have regulation of AI in Uganda, legislation?
Yes, I recommend that after obviously a study, because increasingly, whether within the private or private sector, many of us are utilizing AI. And the only reason for its regulation is to ensure that as we develop it, as we apply it, we make sure that we embed that human aspect. We make sure that there are certain fundamental things that the developers or the users have to implement. Some of these include, for instance, transparency. I think it's important that if a decision is being made in regard to something that affects me as an individual, it's important that I know that this decision is being made by automated means. We actually already have laws in a way that touch issues like that. For instance, the Data Protection and Privacy Act, which I'm privileged to implement as the head of the Personal Data Protection Office, requires that a data subject, and that is an individual, myself and yourself, decisions being made that affect them substantially, and they are solely made by that automated decision making. And that is to ensure that we introduce that empathy. And I like what is happening in the webinar chat, because yes, that has already been brought out, that AI has no feelings. And it may not have, you know, that finer detail, the context of the issue, because I may not meet the demographics or the parameters that have been set by the bank to be able to lend me money. But if I interface with someone who may be the bank manager, I may explain myself better and be able to bring forward my issues and change his mind about whether to offer me a loan or not. Secondly, the issue of consent. When we use these systems, it's important that the developers or the businesses that are using these AI systems give us enough information. How much is this AI system collecting? How is it utilizing that data? What kind of analysis are they picking from this data? How will that analysis affect me as an individual? So even though, yes, we are using machines and we are using these algorithms, it's important that these issues are embedded from the beginning. And that's why we talk about privacy by design. You do not start using and then you now start thinking, how else can I ensure that this system only collects that data that it needs, that this system, once it has done its analysis, it's able to that data and maybe destroy it, that this system will be accountable. Because in many cases, because the decisions are made by the machine or by the robot, a human being may not be able to explain the reasoning behind the decision. And as lawyers, we know sometimes when you file a case, what you want to know is, why was this decision made? And the machine or the AI system may not be able to tell why this is happening. Then, of course, one of the issues that we also need to regulate is ensuring that appropriate security mechanisms are put in place. I think I mentioned earlier that in many cases where AI is deployed, they need a lot of data, they collect a lot of data, they analyze a lot of data. You can imagine what would happen if that data is lost. And in many cases, if you do not put a regulatory framework in place that forces organizations, I know on their own, but if you do not put in the minimum standard, then you may find organizations that either through a data breach lose all the information. And once you lose that information, it can then be utilized for fraud, and many of these other things that we are seeing in our communities.
Thank you very much, Stella. I think very clearly we need regulation for AI. And I think that brings us nicely to, as we shift gear into the realm of data protection. I think you have kind of changed us into that direction. And in that regard, perhaps you have touched on the data implications of AI deployment. That was my next question for you, which I think you have already covered. But as we shift gear into data protection, perhaps it would be a good time for you to tell us what the rationale is for data privacy. Why are you there? I mean, these days, everyone's screaming data protection, data protection. 10 years ago, as I say, 10 years ago, you were doing something else. Today, it's why the fuss? Please. Tell us.
I think this webinar, in a way, demonstrates why we need data protection. I did explain earlier that as we grow, because of the technology advancements, we found ourselves in a situation where a lot of data is collected. It is said that, for instance, every 2 years or less, the volume of data that we have in the world doubles. All of us are on Twitter, are on Facebook. How much data do you think people are sharing, are exchanging on a daily basis? Now, when we talk about data protection and issues of privacy, in many cases, people think this is a new thing. It is not a new thing. If I can take you back to Genesis in the Bible, if you remember, before Eve or Eva ate the forbidden fruit, human beings were free, they were moving around. Then after the punishment that was given by God, suddenly Adam and Eve were covering themselves. And for me, I think that's where the issues of privacy started from. Because as human beings, there are certain things you want to keep to yourself. That is why you find that even in our homes, even in our traditional houses that we used to have, the bedroom was always tucked away. The bathroom was always tucked away, thereby exemplifying why privacy is inherent in us as human beings. In the legal realm, we know that Article 27 of the Constitution already gives us, as citizens of this country, a right to privacy. Now, in many cases, we used to talk about privacy in terms of the postal organization cannot open my email. Or cannot open my mail when they receive my parcels. But we know these parcels are also opened by URA because of the legal framework under which they operate. But you can imagine if we didn't have that, then people's information would be lying around everywhere, shared by everyone. Now, what has brought this conversation to the fore are the things we've been talking about. Because with the advent of technology, before, if you went to a hospital, for instance, you'd see your doctor. In many cases, the doctor would maybe even not have a diary. They would just talk to you, find out what your problem is, send you to the lab. You finish everything, as you know, in a few minutes. Today, when I go to my clinic, everything is digitized. So my records are already within that computer system. After they do the triage, when I go to the doctor, I find the doctor with their computer open. And whatever I say, they enter there. Remember, this information stays there. So previously, you would have to either be a nurse, you go through the filing system or the cabinets for this health center. But now, even a hacker can access that information and put it on the dark web. Or they can access this information and start blackmailing you. I did mention earlier that for many of us who have smartphones, these smartphones are tracking a lot. Actually, you can even determine how healthy you are using your smartphone. Because when you sit, when you stand, when you walk, when you run, it is tracking even without your knowledge. Then, of course, there's a lot of data that we store on our gadgets, the emails, the conversations. These days, we are obsessed with the voice notes, the videos, all those things are stored. And it was very, very important that these issues are regulated. The other issue why it is so important is that as human beings, everyone is also worried, because we all know how information is moving, how large these data sets are. And because of that, a lot of discussions have been held to ensure that as the technology advances, we make sure that the privacy of individuals is actually protected. Of course, once this law comes in place, like the Data Protection and Privacy Act, it ensures that those who are collecting and processing your data are actually regulated. Secondly, it provides the basic requirements. And those are the principles that whoever is collecting or processing your data must comply with. Some of these include the issue of transparency, being able to tell you why they are collecting your data, how they are going to utilize it, who they are going to share it with, how long they will keep that data, so that even you, as you make that decision, whether to download that application, whether to access that service, you actually have the necessary information to know who is even going to hold your data and how they are going to utilize it. The second principle is that they only collect what they need and nothing more, because it's very common for us to go into organizations and they want your age, they want your name. Sometimes when we apply, let's say for visas, they even want to know your parents' names. And you wonder, I'm 60 years old, really? Why do you need the details of my parents? I'm an adult, I'm independent. So some of these laws are meant to check excesses. Then one of the other ones that we can really talk about, especially in terms of AI, is the security of these systems. Because we know everyone is automating, everyone is using AI, but what measures are they putting in place to avoid data breaches, which can actually happen? If a data breach happens, is your information encrypted, for instance? Because if it's encrypted, then you make it then harder for criminals to misuse that data. I think in a nutshell, there's a lot I can talk about, but I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. That's interesting. Just to take you on a little more in that regard, I know that, yes, there are lots of people who mine data, but we also know that government, there's an element of surveillance. You're part of the government, and I don't know how comfortable you are to answer this question, but since you are the regulator, is the government within the scope of your mandate to regulate their surveillance activities and the data they gather for citizens? You need to unmute. Stella, you need to unmute.
I think I wouldn't want to use the word surveillance because surveillance denotes the perspective that what is being done is wrong. But we know that in many cases, when government implements a program, they have a legislation that is supporting that program. As a country, we do not have, I'm not aware of a law that requires like open surveillance without any restrictions. For instance, I can talk about the RICA Act, the Regulation of Interception of Communications Act, which allows, first of all, which requires telecom companies to provide an avenue that can allow government to investigate certain issues. And the safeguards within that law, even before the Data Protection and Privacy Act was passed, there were already privacy safeguards within that law that require that if someone's communication is going to be intercepted, there should be, that should be done with the support of a warrant. And they provided for a process. Who applies for this warrant? What information do they have to provide to the judge before that warrant is issued? Within that same law, it is indicated that if it is so urgent as taking place at that particular time, it actually provides that, yes, you can intercept, but within 48 hours, you're required to obtain a court order. So in a way, that is why I don't agree that it is surveillance in a negative way. It is a provision of a government service, particularly in the prevention of crime. So there are certain exceptions to some of these issues to allow government to implement its mandate and protect its citizens.
All right, thank you. Thank you. I would like to turn it a little back towards members, things that concern lawyers. You being the regulator, what I know that the Data Protection Act places upon various entities compliance obligations. What are the opportunities that there are for lawyers in this sphere? I mean, many lawyers here have clients, international and local, and maybe their practices have been, you know, it's not an area that they thought is critical. Is there, you know, is this something that, why should someone think of this being important?
I think there are a lot of opportunities for us as lawyers. Moses, as you indicated, 10 years ago, I was doing something totally different. And I've metamorphosed into something else. If I had sat back and not updated my skills and not gotten involved in this sector, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now. Samuel did talk about, I think you did ask about the impact of AI on the legal profession. What I know is that AI will enable the efficient handling of the, I don't know which word to use, but the mundane tasks, things that can be automated, AI can do. But obviously lawyers are very critical in terms of analysis, in terms of incorporating the context. There's a lot of opportunity for lawyers there. Now, as we grow within this industry, or as technology grows, of course, there are new fields, like the field of privacy and data protection, which I would encourage us as lawyers to take. A number of lawyers where their clients from abroad are asking them, please go and register us with the Personal Data Protection Office. But you find the lawyer goes through the data. I think it's important for us as lawyers to also open our minds to the developments within our, that are happening around us. I think a lawyer who only relies on, let's say, going to court will miss out a lot on a number of opportunities. For instance, having Uganda started implementing the Data Protection and Privacy Act in 2021. Now, beyond the registration of a data controller or a data collector, within those organizations, they are supposed to do data protection policies. They are supposed to prepare privacy notices. They are supposed to have mechanisms for for resolving complaints. I believe lawyers should do this. We shouldn't only think about agreements. Given our analytical skills, given our ability to read and write and communicate, we would be very good policy developers. And I've seen a number of, especially the big firms, now getting into the space of preparing privacy policies for their organizations. And I think you'd earn that money much earlier than if you are dealing with a criminal matter at Buganda Road Court. So I think we need to think out of the box. We need to embrace technology. I think many people say lawyers don't like technology, but we need to embrace it, even within our own offices. There's nothing wrong there's nothing wrong with embedding AI in your activities, ensuring that you automate some of the information that your client gives you so that you can analyze it and know that client B maybe for the last 10 years has been paying me maybe 25% of the earnings of the firm. There's no way you'll know until you utilize AI to analyze some of this information. Now, when you do that, it means then you focus on that client. Maybe you give them a relationship manager. I'll borrow from the banking world. So let's make use of some of these opportunities that are available to us.
Sure, thank you. That's interesting. I wanted to, you remember we used, when we were going for our second AI moment in just a bit, and we'll get results from our polls. But before we go, you recall that the employment contract that the ChatGPT did not have a data protection clause. Did you notice? It did not have a data protection clause. So again, there you go. They may not. Do you recommend, maybe I should ask that, do you recommend that employment contracts should have data protection clauses?
Definitely, because the weakest link in terms of an organization complying with our laws, in many cases, the employee. And it can even be the employee at the reception who does not know that the organization is supposed to secure this information. Now, one of the recommendations that we are giving organizations is, first of all, you must train your staff, all your staff, because organizations collect personal data at different points. At the reception, if it's your marketing team, they are collecting data. If it's your procurement team, they are collecting data. If it is your HR team, they are collecting data. Even the partner could be collecting data. So if you don't embed it in the contract and you've not trained the staff member, and your HR policy does not include confidentiality clauses, it means that if this employee breaches the confidentiality clauses or the requirements of the organization, guess who will suffer the brunt? It will be the organization or the firm. So it's important that these are embedded in the employment contracts.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much. Let us quickly get an AI moment now. We're going to be asking questions, some of which will be answered by AI and others will be by our panelists. I want to quickly invite the ladies, Jemima and Julian, to just take us through our second AI moment very quickly. Over to you, ladies.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julian Mwewaze. I am an associate with S&L Advocates, and together with Jemima, we were handling the demos on AI, just to have a demonstration of how AI is being integrated into the work environment currently. So I'm going to share my screen, and then we'll ask ChatGPT again a number of questions, some which will be answered by ChatGPT, because I remember earlier Moses mentioned that GPT was coming in as a panelist. So that will be our first question. Someone in the chat asked who is liable for AI violations. I think that was Joseph Okiro. So we'll have ChatGPT answer that. I hope everyone can see my screen. So as you can see, the answers that are generated by ChatGPT are not particular to maybe the Ugandan sphere or to whatever question one may have, but then they're always used to give pointers to anyone that is working on something along this field. So this is usually used by companies, or if you're making a presentation or preparing something, this is one of the tools that has been helpful. And then earlier, Samuel mentioned that we should have used ChatGPT to tell us the panelists for today's webinar. So the next question will ask ChatGPT who Samuel is.
Is Samuel Bulenzi, not Balenzi? Bulenzi.
Sorry about that.
But it got it.
Yes. So this was just to show that there are a number of privacy concerns. These have been mentioned.
You need to make the right entry. Samuel Bulenzi.
All right. Okay.
Sorry, that's it. You got it right, actually.
Okay, so again, there have been concerns about privacy, and there have been privacy concerns relating to AI and ChatGPT. So from the response that has been generated, there might be some figures who are not widely known or who are private individuals. So sometimes you might ask the AI a question and they will highlight privacy concerns about a certain individual. So I may also ask a sensitive question that might raise privacy concerns. As we all know, under the Data Protection and Privacy Act, information relating to health is sensitive information that cannot be shared. So if you have such a concern with AI, there might be some privacy policies integrated into the system, and this will not be shared by the AI. So some of these may be handled internally or by the AI itself. And then finally, you can also have ChatGPT pose questions to the panelists, like Moses had mentioned. So that will be the last question. So the AI can also generate questions for you. So Moses, in case you wanted to pose this to any of the panelists, over to you.
Thank you. So panelists, before we open the field to the rest of the members, I'll just pick two of these. What are the current regulations in Uganda regarding the use of AI in various industries? Number one will be for Samuel, and number two, how is the Ugandan government addressing the potential ethical and legal implications of AI technology? I think this has been answered. What steps has Uganda taken to ensure privacy and protection in the context of AI applications? I think even that one has been answered. Let's see. How do Ugandan authorities monitor and enforce compliance with AI-related regulations, data privacy? So Madam Stella will answer number 5. let's take number 1 and number 5. I'll invite Samuel just to take that, and then Madam Stella to take number 5.
ChatGPT is not very friendly. Not this time. Look, I honestly would say more generally around data than specifically to AI. So what I just wanted to show, for example, I can see here, I'm trying to turn on my camera, and AI is telling me that my camera is being used by other apps. I don't even know which app, so God help me. But I think in general, I think the regulations sort of define who the data owner is in any transaction or engagement. And then it defines how data is to be collected, how it is processed, whether it's processed locally or externally in the country. And obviously, it also talks about, the regulation also talks about who can actually be called to the courts of law in the event that data is misused. And when you, the user or the data processor, realizes that you have done something that's against the law, where do you report that? And that's just sort of an indication of what that is all about. But I think I just wanted to also build on part of the conversation that Stella so eloquently put across, to just get the audience here to think about, between Facebook or any of your social media sites, who really is the product. And of course, the leading statement that I will use, that if you're not paying for a product, then the chances that you are the product actually are very high. I'm just leaving that out there to just tickle your minds a little bit. Back to you, Moses.
Thank you. Indeed, who is the product? Without wasting time, Stella, I want you to answer number 6. What are the safeguards in place to prevent AI systems from perpetuating biases or discrimination in Uganda? Very quickly, before we get into the Q&A from the audience.
Okay, I'll answer generally some of the questions that have been asked by ChatGPT.
You can do only number 6.
Okay, so number 6 in a way is related to the others. There's a lot of work the government of Uganda has done. First of all, it has developed an AI policy, an AI ethical policy. So we have it in place, which means that in Uganda, if you develop AI, you'll be following that policy. And that policy talks about the issues I had earlier talked about, where you have AI for good, AI that is human-centric, AI that ensures responsible data use. Now, some of the safeguards unique in Uganda, they are the same safeguards. For instance, we talk about, in some cases, when developers are developing these systems, they come to us to get guidance on how to proceed. Some of the guidance we give is minimize the data that this AI system is required to collect. Before you utilize live data, can you utilize, for instance, synthetic data? Because this also can be created and can have the same effect as live data. Some of the other protections, for instance, ensuring that you anonymize the data, because if you anonymize it, then it doesn't affect particular individuals. It probably just addresses the issue. So for now, I can't say the safeguards are within the law. I think the challenge is how compliant are these developers. On our part, we continue to engage and to disseminate this information and to create awareness. For instance, when the president reached out to me and Moses, I was very happy that this discussion was happening and was being spearheaded by Uganda Law Society, because you'll find that lawyers in many cases will provide those checks and balances. Because if your client is aggrieved, it's more likely that the lawyer will be the one to fight for their clients' rights. So those are some of.
Okay, thank you very much, Stella. We will now get into open the space for questions from the members on the call. If you have a question, please, or comment, please, you're welcome to put up your hand, and we will.
Perpetuating biases or discrimination.
Okay, I see a hand. Whose hand is that I see? So as I said, members, you're welcome to put up your hand and ask a question or make a comment, if there is any. I see Brian Kalule, your hand is up. You can unmute your microphone and ask a question or make your comment.
Right.
You're still muted. You have muted yourself.
Thanks, Moses. Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you for the presentation and for the wonderful panelists. My questions, two questions in one, and it's addressed to the director. And what's her full title? Miss Stella Adibatese. Sorry, I forget the title.
It's a long one. Just call me Stella, Brian.
So my question is about, and I noticed that the NITA, the DPO, is undertaking so many initiatives at creating awareness about data protection and privacy, and which is commendable. But I would also, I think my request is that those initiatives should also be extended to the judiciary. I had an instance in court where I think one of my clients, one of the public entities went to their premises. They were looking for certain information, but they ended up seizing personal, really things that constitute personal data, photographs, medical records, and things of the sort. And of course, we objected to that and ran to court. But the judicial officer, we were seeking for interim relief, and the judicial officer declined to give it, which is fair enough. But the reason they gave is what surprised me. He said that if your clients have nothing to hide, why don't they let these people see the things? So to me, it showed that they didn't appreciate the entire concept of privacy and data protection. And I think it would all help if you could do some capacity building also with the judiciary too, but especially around data and data protection, given that it's a new area for all of us. The second is about enforcement. I mean, we know that there's a lot of data collection by entities located out of Uganda. I mean, these are apps we sign up to, Apple Music, YouTube. So how is the office looking at enforcing against those entities? That for me, frankly, that's always the elephant in the room when people come and ask about whether the act applies to those entities, which is yes, but how will the enforcement happen? Thank you very much.
Over to you, Stella.
Thank you, Brian, for those comments. Question, I think the one on creating awareness with the judiciary is a comment, which I agree with entirely. And of course, these measures are ongoing, and I'm sure we'll be able to engage the judiciary who are attempting to go through JELOS, because as you know, there's a lot of, there's limited funding currently, but we'll be able to do that. Compliance for the big techs, as you rightly stated, the law applies to them if they are collecting data from Ugandan citizens. Obviously, the biggest challenge we have is the issue of jurisdiction. Yes, you may want to take an enforcement action against, let's say, Meta, but Meta is not within your jurisdiction. They could even say the rules in the states maybe allow us to do A, B, C, D, and we are cognizant of that. Now, Uganda is not the only country in this space, especially within Africa, that is grappling with these challenges. What we've done as data protection authorities is that we have an umbrella body, which is called the Network of Data Protection Authorities, where we are discussing a regional approach to enforcement against these big tech organizations. Because as you rightly stated, this can be a challenge for a country like Uganda, where you find even this organization may even be earning more than your entire government budget. So enforcing against them, they are not within your jurisdiction. Your population, I don't know if the Ugandan population, for instance, if they said, do not use Google, do not use Facebook, do not use WhatsApp, whether our population can work with the government and stop using these applications. Our people will continue using these applications. So what we are doing is to educate them. And these organizations actually have already reached out to many of us, including Meta, and they are very willing to educate our populations on how to safely utilize their information. We know that if we approach them at a regional level, then one of the things we are insisting on, for instance, as a NADPA, that's the organization, is that whatever terms they have for the European population or the US population are the same terms that the African population should have at a regional level. Because we noticed that I think after the European Commission penalized one of those organizations, they did respond and updated their terms and conditions. But the terms and conditions for the African region are different from the ones that are provided, let's say, to Europe, where they've been doing data protection for decades and decades. So those are some of the discussions that we are having. I hope, Brian, that answers you.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stella. I don't see any more hands up. I can see there are some questions in the chat. The first one is from Brian. I think it's been answered. There is another from Alan Rokoko, which I think has been answered. Government entities, including URA and IGG, make several requests for information beyond their mandate. How do we harmonize the need for data protection from government entities? Stella, can I say, perhaps this one you have answered already?
I think I can clarify a little more because I know it can be a challenge. I know Alan I think works with Umeme. Or,
yes.
not sure, one
Yeah.
of those big organizations. So I understand they constantly ask them for this information. And my view is, Alan, if you find that, because government bodies are also required to comply. This law applies to the private and public bodies. So if the public body comes and asks for information, they have to show you what gives them that mandate. If they do not have that mandate to receive that information, please ask for a court order. Because I know at least that's what the telecoms do. Ask for a court order, and because it's incumbent upon you, because you're the one who collected this data, to secure it and ensure that you only share it in accordance with the law. So in your analysis, if you find that the government body does not have the mandate to receive this information, you can formally inform them that we don't see the legal basis. Because remember, whatever you do with personal data that you've collected, the key issue is that what is your legal basis? And the responsibility is on you as the data controller, processor, or collector, not on the government body. So if you release this information and the data subject comes up to you, then you'll be liable and not the government body. Thank you.
Well, Alan has said they did, and they instead got summons and a threat of imprisonment. So I don't know. I'm sure in practical terms, it's not as easy. I have also had experiences with, and maybe you can answer this, Stella, on top of this, labor officers asking for salary information. And they will premise their requests on the Employment Act, I think, Section 13. How do we get them aligned to the other end of the stick, data protection? Well, there's another.
I think it goes back to my response. They have to show you the mandate that they have, where their legal basis comes from. Of course, when you talk about salaries and you talk about a labor officer, already that means that labor officer is within the employment realm. Now, for them to make a determination on the matter that you've taken for their resolution, obviously they may need the salaries, but the salaries that are specific to the complaint that they are handling. So still that assessment has to be done.
So if there's no complaint and they're asking for everyone's salary, we should be at liberty to say, get a court order.
Yes, I think there you can say no. Okay. Alternatively, if they want that data, you can anonymize it so that you give them the data, because I'm assuming they would need that data to inform their policies, maybe to understand what is happening within the market. You anonymize that data and send it to them so that they still have the data they need, but data that does not
infringe.
Yes, that doesn't infringe on the privacy rights of the particular employees.
Okay, thank you. There is another question here. I think this one will be for Samuel. Apart from ChatGPT, which is the most well-known AI application, what are the other AI with critical impact on Ugandan society that we need to pay attention to? Samuel, the question is in the chat, if you could take that.
All right. Friends, I have issues with my camera, but just please bear with me. So maybe it's just to say, first of all, that it may not specifically be about Uganda, but what I know that really competes well with ChatGPT is BARD by Google. BARD, B-A-R-D by Google, really competes well with ChatGPT. Then Microsoft has Binge AI as well. And then you have Sparrow by DeepMind. So there's a couple of other, AI technologies out there that can be leveraged. One that I know that one of the companies that supports community work in Uganda that they have used, it's really a conversation bot which can have a fairly meaningful conversation with you. And they have literally used mostly UChat to have that model sort of put together. I think that's just an indication of what else is out there. But there's so many more. There's Open AI Playground. That's like considered superior because it's more current dated. But there's lots out there. It's a journey.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Samuel. Any other questions? I don't see any other questions in the chat. I don't see any hands up.
Moses, there was a question from Olive Sabiti,
Yes.
which you may speak on.
Okay.
As the convener.
Okay, let me trace it. What was the objective of the webinar in terms of employment? Was it to consider whether AI or robotics is a computer to human resource? If not, please explain. Well, I'm not sure exactly what what answer you want, Olive, but I can tell you what the objective is. It was to generate interest in the area of AI, and perhaps a good time to wrap up to see if we have met our objective, being the employment and the labor and retirement benefits cluster. We are looking to upskill, get to know more about what our clients care a lot about, beyond just, what's happening in the court. Sometimes we get so stuck in what the judges are saying, but we may want to ask what are the clients, what is happening in the market. And some of these things are already deployed, and many of our clients are asking these questions. So I think it's important for us to begin to have these conversations and bring experts to speak to us and whet our appetites. So I hope that we have learned something. And again, perhaps we can do a poll. Do we have all our results? And ladies, the poll results, or were they declared along the way? I see another question, lastly, from Angelina. We are always asked for our names and phone contacts when entering various offices, but it's not clear why this information is required. There is need for more training. Stella, is this, maybe this is a comment. Providing phone details before access is granted to an installation.
Sorry, Moses, please ask again.
So Angelina,
my circumstances. There's a bit of noise where I am.
Sorry, and the question is in the chat, but we are always asked for our names and our phone contacts when accessing various offices.
Oh,
yeah.
I saw that question from Angelina.
Angelina, yes.
Yes, it's true. Even me, I'm requested for that information. I think my answer to it is the following. First of all, the Data Protection and Privacy Act does not stop organizations collecting this data. What it requires of those organizations is to have a notice at the reception that explains why they are collecting and how they will utilize this data. I think what we need is to start testing the law by challenging some of these organizations on their application of their own privacy policies. But the law itself does not stop organizations collecting the data. It just regulates what are those things these organizations are supposed to do to make sure that your data is safe and that you have reasonable information on why they are collecting the data. But I think the enforcement has also to come from the data subjects, because obviously the office cannot be everywhere, but where you find that your data is being abused or that they are not explaining why. Most of these measures came in following the following 9/11, where most stringent security measures were put in place. I think that's when we started seeing registration building. But obviously, once that data is collected, how it's utilized and how it is stored is very important for the data subject. I hope I've given some clarification on that.
Most certainly, yes. All right, it's 5 minutes to the end. I don't see any further questions, but I can see the poll results. AI at work. Have you incorporated the use of AI in your workplace? Well, 40% of you said yes, and the other 60 said no. Again, this is to encourage us to utilize some of these resources. What was the other poll? If you can post it, repost, is it possible? Yeah, AI relevance. AI relevance. I have lost it. I can't see it. Anyhow, that being what it is, I want to thank you all, ladies. Oh, yeah, here it is. Relevance of AI. Is it a friend of foe? 76% of you said it's a foe, it's a friend, and 24% said it's a foe. So, well, it's clearly that AI is something that we should embrace as a friend. And since we are in safe hands, hopefully, maybe there'll be regulation and legislation. And as the labor cluster, and I'm sure there's a technology cluster, the Law Society should be involved in getting around the table on informing what the legislation should look like in terms of regulating AI, to make sure that it is what is required in a free and democratic society. So without wasting any more time, I know it's coming to 5 and we all want to queue up for the jam, those of you who are still in office. Allow me to extend my deep gratitude, or perhaps I should ask someone. Let me ask someone who is on the call. Can I ask someone to extend a vote of thanks? Alan, are you on the call? Are you still on the call? I am just going to. Alan, can you extend a vote of thanks to our panelists very quickly?
Thank you very much. This is a very relevant topic, and we are grateful that we've had such eminent people speaking about the subject. I'd like to appreciate you, Moses, Stella, and Joshua, who else? And actually also the people who attended. That's very, very interesting questions. I think this is a very timely conversation, considering how much technology has more or less taken over our lives, and we're grateful that we have the protection of the government, and I believe that regulators are not sleeping. Stella, I'm sure you're not sleeping at all, trying to find ways to protect us. I think us lawyers are in the right place, and where we might have some challenges with staying employed, as people feared, we might need to start suing over data protection issues. So this might actually create more work for us. So thank you very much. Thank you to the cluster. and we're grateful for this hour that you've given us. Thanks a lot.
Sure. Thank you very much, Alan. And yes, thank you all members. It's been great having you. This was our first event. We look forward to having many more engaged ones. And without any further ado, I see some notes here from my predecessor, Agnes Tivaeta. Thank you for those remarks. And thank you for attending, and for the rest of you. Have a good evening. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, Moses, and thank you, ULS.
Thank you, ULS. Thank you, Stella and Moses.
Thank you, Samuel.